And now, please help me welcome the amazing Sarita Gupta, Executive Director of of National Jobs with Justice.
So far, huh? And the energy in this room is fantastic. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm Sarita Gupta. I'm the Executive Director of Jobs with Justice. And I'm really thrilled to be working so closely with the Center for Community Change, the Center for Popular Democracy, or the Working Families Organization, and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights to propose the blueprint for restoring balance in our economy and building an economy that works for every family. I'm excited to be with all of you this morning, having an important conversation about solutions to inequality. We have an amazing opportunity before us right now to work together to put families first and to propose investments and policies that can achieve jobs. Not just any jobs, but good jobs for all who want to work. Our panel this morning is on building a new economy, and I'd like to briefly introduce our participants. We have, directly to my right here, Veronica Mendez, who is the co-director of Centro de Trabajadores, Unidos, and Lucha, otherwise known as CETUL, from Minnesota. We have, to her right, Rasheen Aldridge, who has been an incredible leader of St. Louis Jobs with Justice, and a key part of the fight for 15 and all the amazing work that's been happening in Ferguson. And to his right, we have Gloria Walton, who is the president and CEO of Strategic Concepts in Organizing and Policy Education, otherwise known as SCOPE, in LA from Los Angeles. But before we go to the participants, I want to start us off and tell you a little bit about Jobs with Justice and why we think it's so important to be in this room talking about building a new economy. At Jobs with Justice, our vision of a world where everyone makes it is anchored by our deep belief that all people should have collective bargaining rights, employment security, and a decent standard of living within an economy that works for everyone. We understand, as we've heard this morning, that work has changed. Very few workers put in their 8 hours on the job and go home with enough in their pockets to feed a family. And as we've heard this morning, more than 42.6 million workers today are stuck in subcontracted, temporary, or part-time jobs, facing erratic schedules, cashing too few paychecks, lacking long-term security, and left without a voice on the job. In addition, 42 million Americans earn less than $15 an hour. So let's just take a moment and sit with these facts for a moment, right? So more than 42.6 Americans are in contingent work, and 42 million Americans earn less than $15 an hour. And meanwhile, as we heard from Deepak this morning, 1/3 of the country, 106 million people, live beneath 200% of the poverty line without enough to sustain their families. In a few minutes, we're going to hear about what people are doing and building locally throughout the country to bring our economy more in balance. The solutions we're highlighting are simple but transformative. We're challenging ourselves, elected leaders, and policymakers to make better choices, to guarantee good wages and benefits, to invest in communities, and to truly value families. So I want to give you an example of what putting families first would look like if we think for a moment about the home care sector, essential work that helps our nation's elders and people with disabilities live with dignity. And I'm going to draw from my experience at Jobs with Justice and co-leading an effort with the Domestic Workers Alliance called Caring Across Generations. This is a campaign which brings together aging Americans, people with disabilities, in-home care workers, and their families to increase every family's access to the care and support they need at a price they can afford, while creating millions of high-quality in-home care jobs. Our country is in a beautiful elder boom. Every 8 seconds, someone turns 65 in America. And this year alone, 4 million Americans will reach retirement age. By 2040, nearly 30 million Americans will need some form of home care to meet their basic daily needs. Already, there's a huge demand for long-term care services like home care. The future of care will require the help of home care workers to allow members of families to continue working full-time while ensuring that aging adults and their families can age in the way that most of us want, with dignity and independence at home and in our communities. So it's no surprise that home care is one of the fastest growing industries, and with the elder boom, the need for quality home care will skyrocket. Currently, there are 2 million home care workers in the United States, and by 2020, that number is expected to double. Yet, as we've heard this morning, just to reinforce, the wages are unfathomably low, with average wages just a little over $9 per hour, so low that the women, mostly women of color and immigrant women, we count on to care for our loved ones, can't afford to care for their own families. The jobs are so unsustainable that almost half of all home care workers must rely on public assistance, like food stamps, to care for their own families. With low wages, part-time and unpredictable hours, and a lack of benefits for workers, it's not surprising that there's such high turnover. Home care is the kind of job that people don't even recognize as a real job. It's called companionship or help, or we're still fighting for inclusion in basic workers' rights protections like minimum wage and overtime. And so many women who love this work, are dedicated to this work, are forced to leave the profession if they want to care for their own families in a sustainable way. Just to share an example, we're working with the filmmakers on a documentary called Care, which includes the story of Lori, a professional caregiver who had to leave the job despite loving it so much to become a truck driver, where the pay is much better and where she has benefits and can support her children. As Deepak said earlier, we have an opportunity right now, today, to shape the future of care jobs in our economy. We can create millions of care jobs that we need. We can make sure they're good quality jobs with actual training and career ladders. We can make sure that there's a pathway to citizenship for the existing immigrant care workforce, and certainly ensure that families can afford and access the care that they need. And across the country, there are so many groups, organizations in states who are on the front lines of this issue, who are moving really innovative solutions. They're organizing, they're offering policy ideas in places like Maine and Ohio and Minnesota and Missouri, and the list goes on. So we can create the new care jobs to meet our elder care needs. We can ensure that these jobs provide better wages and benefits. I'm confident of that. So this is just one of the many examples of what it means to put families first and to create good jobs for all. As we move forward with a call to put families first, we're launching an important national conversation. But we're not just talking. We are also redoubling our efforts to make these choices locally, with local campaigns and organizing that will transform our communities. We're going to talk about what we're doing, what we're winning, and what's next. So let's now talk with these wonderful leaders from across the country who are here to share their work and help us understand why this blueprint is needed in our communities. So let's start with Gloria. I'm going to start with you. You are on the forefront of experiments in Los Angeles, where we push for public investment that creates good jobs and training programs, and also green jobs that retrofit buildings and put us on a path for a healthier planet. How should a shift to putting families first impact your work and community?
Thank you, Sarita. So, for my work, a shift to putting families first means that ensuring that communities families live in are healthy and safe. And in the community where I'm from, in South LA, that's not the case. South LA is environmentally overburdened, and we're literally at the front lines of air pollution, where we just define our community by the freeways that surround it. The 10 freeway to the north, the 110 to the east, the 405 to the west, and the 105 to the south. We're at the front lines of toxic production. And compared to other places in the county of LA, we're the first communities to die. We have the highest rates of infant mortality. And on top of all of that, we're chronically under and unemployed. Our undocumented and our Black men are criminalized. And I can't sit up here and talk about my community in South LA without likening it to Baltimore. So I'm sure a lot of folks remember just a little over 20 years ago, South LA also had an uprising. And the heart of that uprising was at Florence and Normandy. And Elsa knows we can walk to it from our office. So a little over 20 years ago in South LA, it was about the beating of a Black man, Rodney King. And now 20 years later, or a little over 20 years later, it's about the murder of many Black men. So on that note, I want to say rest in peace to Freddie Gray, rest in peace to Eric Garner, rest in peace to Walter Scott, and rest in peace to Michael Brown. So incidents like Baltimore do not happen overnight. It really is a buildup of historic disinvestment where communities are fed up. It's about state violence and repression, and all of this is what contributes to the economic and health disparities that our communities face. So I want to invoke the community of Baltimore. I want to invoke Ferguson. I want to invoke the low-income communities in New York. And I want to invoke the community of North Charleston. And when you think of South LA, think of those communities. And that gets me to my next point. Putting families first means ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to a good paying job. That's jobs that are safe, that's jobs that are sustainable, that's jobs with career paths that can support a family. And particularly, those who suffer from structural racism and discrimination need to benefit and have access to those jobs. So the call for good jobs for all, the call for good jobs for everyone, is really about dismantling historical racist policies and discrimination that the Black and brown families that I represent are living with every single day. And that gets me to my third point. Putting families first means a government that values you and me. A government that puts us first. And what I mean by that is providing health care and services like parks, hospitals, clinics, libraries. A government that's committed to generating revenue in a way that's fair. And what I mean by fair is that those who can afford to pay more, pay more. And that begins to address the accelerating economic inequality, and that begins to put our nation back into balance. So given this context, if we do not lead with race and equity front and center, if we do not link economic and environmental justice movements, we will not build the power that we need to win, and we will fail. But like you said, Sarita, we do have some work on the ground that we've done in Los Angeles, at a smaller scale, of course. And the first thing that I want to talk about is our Green Jobs campaign. So Scope brought together 3 different sectors: the community sector, environmentalists, and labor. And what we knew that was critical is that we had to anchor our campaign around real experiences of Black and brown families from South LA. So that was unemployment, that's not testing well for exams, that's needing childcare, that's not having money to pay for transportation. And with those 3 sectors, we understood that our strength was really from a space of common ground and alignment. That's where our power was. We knew that we needed each other. Neither one of our organizations alone, or our sectors for that matter, could have accomplished and achieved and won the historic Green Jobs training program that we won in Los Angeles. And it put people back to work, retrofitting city buildings. And so our ordinance required that half of the work projects had to be in low-income census tracts in South LA. We said that it had to provide apprenticeship training opportunities, which is this concept of earning while learning, and support services to address barriers. And so we took this model Green Jobs training program and replicated it to residential retrofits. And we partnered with Lane and IBEW, Local 18, and we created an entry-level job position at the Department of Water and Power called Utility Pre-Craft Trainee. And Abraham Hernandez, one of our members, I think illustrates the significance of this program best. So Abraham was one of our most active members who graduated from high school. He didn't go to college. He suffered from chronic unemployment and underemployment. And Repower LA granted him the opportunity to be a part of a cohort with other folks who were trying to get a good paying job at the Department of Water and Power. And he told us because he didn't have a job, he didn't have the money to pay for transportation to get to work. And so we figured out a way to provide bus tokens and gas cards for all the trainees. He talked to us about the difficulty with passing his exams, particularly math and reading. And so we structured tutoring and Saturday classes into our program to ensure that people are able to pass their exams. He told us that he didn't have money for a uniform. So we talked to labor about this because they're the ones who have the money. And labor actually helped us get Abraham his first uniform for his job. So now I'm proud to say that he works full-time at the Department of Water and Power as a utility pre-craft trainee. And he's weatherizing residential homes, churches, schools, and small businesses throughout LA. So it's models like this that we need to scale nationally. We created a couple of hundred jobs in LA, but if we scale it to the state, that could be several thousands of jobs. And if we scale that nationally, that can be maybe 1 million jobs. I don't know. I don't know how to do that math. But this is a historic moment that we're in, one where we must and can address these 2 issues with race and equity at the forefront. We're talking about it today in this room, and our members have been talking about it for nearly 2 decades. And recently in Davos, the US Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, said, "We are the first generation that can end poverty, and we are the last generation that can take steps to avoid the worst impacts of climate change." So there is growing momentum even among global political and economic elites that these issues are inextricably connected and must be addressed. And now is our moment to work together and elevate models like we've done in Los Angeles and other models that are happening throughout this country nationally so that we can demonstrate how this is possible.
That's an amazing example of work that you're doing, and just appreciate how much you lifted up the need to lead with race and equity, the importance of aligning our different movements, and just an amazing model. And that's what's so exciting when you talk to so many groups on the ground, the models that are being built and developed that really can and should be scaled up is a big part of what we're aiming to do through this effort. So thanks for sharing that, Gloria. I'm going to go to you for a moment, Veronica. If you could talk a little bit, well, so many of us, let me start with, including myself, have watched your efforts to organize workers, including immigrant workers, cleaning Target stores in Minnesota, and a successful campaign to help those workers build power and form a union. What are your thoughts about how our demands in putting families first and creating good jobs for all would benefit families and communities you know well in Minnesota?
Thanks, Sarita. So I wanted to start out a little bit for folks that hadn't been following. So in Minnesota for the last 4 years, Setul has been leading the campaign for justice in retail cleaning. So janitors that clean big box stores, including Target, that are making minimum wage, that have tremendous work overload, and that had little to no benefits before we started this campaign. So through the work of these leaders and the work of Setul on the ground, we've been able to win an unprecedented victory where Target has ensured that these workers will have organizing rights, that have certain protections, have the right to health and safety committees, and to be able to fight to increase their wages and benefits on the job. So this is tremendous work. That, yes, we're very proud of it. So I just wanted to say that workers that have been leading this fight have taken tremendous risks and made tremendous sacrifices to be leaders in this fight. Workers that are speaking out publicly against abusive and retaliatory bosses, workers that have gone on strike 1, 2, 3, and even 4 times, and each time facing retaliation where bosses are telling workers, if you strike, you will lose your job. And where workers are sacrificing the little wages that they make to take a day, not go to work, and go on strike. So I just want to be very clear that people that are struggling to make ends meet and take care of their families do not make these kinds of decisions lightly. You don't lose a day's worth of pay and risk losing your job that supports your kids and feeds your kids for fun. You do it because there's something worth fighting for, and there's something compelling to you about what you can win. So to say that each one of the workers that has been a leader in this fight could tell you all a compelling story today about why the demands we're putting forward for fair wages, for fair benefits, for putting families first, like each worker could tell you a compelling story about why that matters to them and how it would impact their life. But I wanted to give a quick example from one of the leaders in this fight, a Setul member named Enrique Barcenas. So Enrique has been a leader since the beginning, and Enrique has gout, which I don't know if folks know much about gout, but his ankles and his feet swell up tremendously and cause him so much pain that it's really hard for him to do his job on his feet all night cleaning the store, especially when he's got to rush to be able to finish on time. So he should ideally be taking 1 pill a day, which would calm a lot of that pain and calm a lot of the swelling. Problem is he doesn't have access to health insurance, and his employer doesn't provide access to health insurance, so each one of these pills costs $50. So that's $50 a day, which is just slightly less than what he's making in a day. So as you can imagine, Enrique does not take one of these pills every day. So last year, he was working lots of overtime to be able to save up enough money so that he could have access to this necessary medication. So what happened, as many of you could imagine, he worked so hard that it became unmanageable for his body, and he had to take unpaid time off of work. Again, risking his job, where his boss said, look, we need you, and if you can't come to work, you might not have a job tomorrow. So Enrique was forced to take this unpaid time because he was trying to work so he could get the medicine, but now that he's not working, he can't get the medicine, so he can't go back to work. So it's this cycle that keeps him both in poverty and in pain and makes it impossible for him to provide for the family that's counting on him in Mexico. So if folks like Enrique could have access to jobs where he could have access to health insurance, where he could have a living wage, where he could have paid sick time without fear of losing his job, he would be able to provide for his family in Mexico. He'd be able to provide for himself and have a healthy and dignified life. So that's an example of how I think these benefits impact communities. But I think even more importantly than that, and these are important concrete examples, but thinking more big picture, I think the demands that are being made by Setul members and that are being made by this campaign for putting families first call for structures that create a real voice for workers. I think the reality is that we cannot win any of the things that we want to win until workers have a real voice in determining their futures. The workers are at the forefront of making the demands of what it is that they need because they're the ones who know best. And I want to be clear, anything that's given to people, any rights or benefits that we give to people can be taken away from people because the giver still holds the power, right? So we can't make any sustainable improvements in the economy for low-wage workers until we shift that balance of power between corporations and the workers who are producing their wealth. And when that happens, workers can say, these are the things that we need. Workers can have the opportunity to lead, to win those things. But more importantly, workers then can take ownership over a struggle. Workers can be at the forefront of that fight, and that changes the way people see themselves. It transforms the way people see their leadership and their power over their own lives and in their communities, and that transformation transforms movements. And when we have that kind of transformation in movements, more is possible. We've got more leaders on the front lines, and we have people that have a real stake in this, and it can't get dropped to the side, because if it gets dropped to the side, it's going to impact me, and it's going to hurt me and my family. So I think these are the real benefits that I think make a difference in helping us look towards the long-term changes we need to make. And so an example with Enrique in 2014, right before janitors were going to go on strike for a second time, we were getting ready to go on strike and visit Target at their annual shareholders meetings to talk to them about the problems workers are facing. Target representatives called us, and they agreed to engage in dialogue with workers. They agreed to sit down with workers. Enrique was one of those workers. So we met with Target, and ultimately, as I had mentioned, had very productive dialogue. But afterwards, I sat down with Enrique and I asked him, how did you feel? How was that for you? You know, what do you think? And he said to me, you know, before we sat down to meet with them, I was scared because I thought, well, first of all, I don't speak English. They're not going to understand what I have to say. Why would they listen to me? These are the most powerful people in our state. Why would they listen to me or care what I have to say? And he said, then at the end of the meeting, I realized that powerful people don't just sit down and meet with anybody. They meet with people that they feel like they have to meet with because they're powerful too, right? So,
Power of organizing.
and just to sum up, he said, you know, I realized they met with me because I'm powerful, and that being a leader in this fight is what made me powerful. That's the kind of fight that I want to be a part of. That's the kind of fight I think we need to get this whole movement up off the ground.
That story of Enrique was really powerful because it really mirrors the experience of so many workers in America today, just the enormous challenges when trying to stand up and have a voice in the workplace, and the cycle that you were talking about, and the real risks that workers are taking. I mean, it is amazing the mobilization that happened on April 15th, and if we just take a minute to appreciate the real risks that workers took that day, and the strikes on Black Friday with the Walmart workers, and so many other workers who joined in that fight and that movement, there were real risks taken. So I really appreciate you raising that, and the importance and the need for a real voice for workers and how transformative it can really be. So thank you for that. So Rasheen, let's go to you. You are an incredible leader. I've watched you organize and speak up as a worker in the Fight for 15 movement, as a young African-American leader confronting the killing of Mike Brown, and then serving on the Ferguson Commission. What are your thoughts about how good jobs and good wages relate to the struggle for racial justice?
Thank you. Before I begin, if you know this, just say it with me. And hopefully we can get some energy going. Show me.
Show me.
No. So apparently we don't know this. So I'm just going to tell you guys how to do this. I say show me, you say 15. Let's try one more time, one more time. Show me. 15. Show me. 15. Show me. 15. All right, we got it now. There we go. There we go, guys. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored and blessed to be here to be talking about some very important issues. In my opinion, I think issues that cannot wait no longer, issues that need to be acted on right now because these are people's lives that are at stake. These are families that need to be fed. These are people that are asking themselves if it's going to be heat or if it's going to be electric or if it's going to be food. And that's a horrible decision, a horrible thought even in individuals' heads that they have to have on a day-to-day basis. I have been part of the Fight for 15. I'm pretty sure y'all know what that is. It has been fast food workers that have been standing up for a livable wage and a union. In these fast food industries, a lot of people may assume that it is young people like myself, but sadly it is not. In majority of these fast food industries, it is women, middle-aged, that are trying to support a family. In these industries, it is people who say that these jobs are their jobs that they have to live off of because no other jobs will hire them. When the factory jobs went away, McDonald's and Burger King came to stay. And that's sad because quality, affordable jobs left and low-wage, unacceptable jobs continued to build in communities which only represented majority of people of color. As fast food workers continued to step up, they went on strike and they said, we want 15 in a union because we're working at McDonald's, we're working at Burger King, and we can't survive off $7.35. We can't survive off $8. We can't even survive off of $8.50 that I was making at Jimmy John's, and that's unbelievable. Once again, like I say, these are individuals who just want to go to work, pay their bills, be able to have childcare, and go home. But that's not the reality. I remember one time going to work, and my friend Shaniqua, she had worked 7 days a week. She worked really hard, 7 days a week, 40 hours. But note, in these industries, you're not getting the full time. So even though she was working 40 hours, she wasn't getting the benefits of having the sick day leave or getting the benefits of having child care while she was at work all day and all night. And one day she went to the back. Probably the best day that fast food workers, and only day that fast food workers look up to, is payday, because there's not much else that much in these jobs. So as payday came and she went to the back and she grabbed her check, she looked at it. Once again, she had worked 7 days, every single day, not one break, 40 hours a week, and probably even more. When she looked at her check, she just bawled. She broke down and she ran to her car. Now I remember chasing after her and I asked, like, Shanika, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she told me I can't pay my bills. And I have a child. And this is the reality of what not just fast food workers are facing on a day-to-day basis, but what low-wage workers are facing every single day. And it has to stop. People, we don't have to live like this. We're living in a world where corporations like McDonald's are making more than ever, but only paying their workers a little bit. McDonald's spends billions of dollars on advertisement while workers have to rely on food stamps and other government assistance. These jobs, low-wage jobs like McDonald's and Burger King's, once again are not, unfortunately, let me say that again, these jobs like McDonald's and Burger King are in communities that are like mine. And that is even the worst problem. When you continue to put these low-wage jobs in African-American communities and not putting the Boeings and the Wells Fargo jobs in these communities, that creates a huge problem. That creates a problem of people not knowing where they're going to be able to get their next meal. That creates a problem for the individuals. That creates a problem for the families, not sure if they're going to even eat. And that creates a problem for the community, And that is the bigger problem. If we continue to put these low-wage jobs in these communities, we will continue to see high poverty rates. We will continue to see high violence, high crime. When I look back at August 9th and the killing of Michael Brown, I remember calling up my fast food sister, Janina Jenkins, who had worked at the McDonald's on West Florissant, right at the scene, right in the heart of where everything happened. And I told her, we got to do something. We got to use the skills that we have learned to, one, see what's going on, and to hopefully organize with other individuals on the ground to make this situation better, and not just have individuals taking their emotion, and it's a justifiable emotion, but leading in a different direction of how we can take it this way and get our message across. But that didn't happen, because what happened to Mike Brown wasn't any typical organizing. This wasn't a typical type of organizing thing. This was a crisis that happened. And when we went out there on day 2, we quickly found ourselves trying to organize to protest. That day 2, when I looked at it and I thought about the killing and the Mike Brown, I thought deeper. I thought, this isn't, we see these all the time of African Americans being slayed down at the hands of police. But why? Why is this happening? Why do certain communities not have quality jobs? Why do certain communities not have jobs where they can provide a family off of? Why are we not, or why the government and elected officials are not investing in these communities? Because if we don't invest in these communities, we see what continues to happen in Ferguson, Charleston, and Baltimore. And you see the location where these are happening. These aren't happening in St. Louis and Clayton, a very rich neighborhood. These are happening in neighborhoods where people are trying to get by, where people sadly may have to do, but people may have to do things where it's not the right things, like selling illegal substance just to survive off of. We really need to get back to putting families first. We really need to get back to thinking about communities that do not have the same opportunities, the same jobs, the same investments as a community or a zip code that is just a few miles away that have these big corporation jobs. But I'm hopeful, not only because of the fast food workers and not only because of all the activists in the Black Lives Matter movement, but I'm hopeful because of young people have been stepping up and saying, no more will we continue to let these injustices happen. From the fast food stands, no more will we let these economic injustices happen, of going to work 38 hours, not getting a livable wage, not having a union to have some type of a group that would have, so you can have a voice in the workplace, so you can have that child care, so you can have that health care. But also the other young people that have been stepping up around the Black Lives Matter movement and saying, we won't let this racial injustice happen anymore. And these two things connect, and if we do not connect them, we will be back here very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasheen. And I think so much of what you talked about around the real hard choices that people are having to make, given the realities, the economic realities that they're living in, is really powerful. And actually, all three of you really lifted up how important it is to be organizing around our whole selves, that we can't continue to organize as workers in the workplace and around environmental issues in our communities and in our neighborhoods. Like, we have to find ways to connect all these movements and organize around our whole beings, which I appreciated in all of your examples. I want to move to a few more questions just to continue the discussion. I'd love to hear a little bit about what each of you are learning about how local organizing and local campaigns can build into larger movements and transformative victories. So maybe Gloria, do you want to kick us off?
So let's lessons. I feel like I have probably about 30 lessons I could talk about, but I'll talk about 3. So one of the first lessons that I learned as an organizer when I started as an intern 13 years ago at Scope is that decisions are being made every single day on my behalf without me. And that the conditions that me and my family lived in were not coincidence, but that there's real people who are that are deciding these conditions. And so that gets me to the first lesson, is that the folks most impacted by the problems and conditions, those folks that are struggling every day to make ends meet like my mama, must be at the center of solutions. And the second lesson that I'd like to talk about is inside-outside strategy. So inside strategy, I would say, is probably one of the most dominant theories of change that most people know and turn to when they're thinking about change. You put a good person on the inside, and magically change will happen, right? Everyone thought Obama's in there, okay, you know, we're free. And and then you learn that that's not the case, because anytime you have one individual going on the inside of an institution, does that individual change the institution, or does that institution potentially change the individual? And we could debate about that all day long. But the point is that there are huge and powerful forces pushing that individual to the right. And that's corporations, that's lobbyists, that's other financial interests. So given all these dynamics and trends and forces that are moving you to the right, I would say that it's probably really easy when you're on the inside to start settling for what's possible versus pushing for what's needed. We know that the nature of politics is compromise. And so that's why us on the outside, it's imperative for us to be intentional about strategies to build political power. And most often we think that our job is solely about protests. And while protests are critical, and it is an essential role, we can't stop there. And we have to go beyond protests to really figuring out how to build organized, real political power. And one of the ways that we've done this in LA is we've built a voting base of 50,000 people that our members have spoken to over the past 5 to 6 years, who we track in a database. And what I mean by that is that I can say how many times I've spoken to you and about what and what you've responded. And that's 50,000 people that we have in a database that our members have talked to on a repeated basis. So in that context, it's our job to develop proactive systemic policy solutions so that our insiders can push for those solutions. And then we really need to anchor our insiders against that inevitable pull of the right. And it really is about us delivering that political power that's needed to win our policy agendas. And then last, I just really want to underscore this point that all of us really made earlier about leading with race and equity front and center. So the fact of the matter is that we can have a new, clean, green, mean economy that creates millions of jobs with the exact same structural inequities and concentrations of wealth and power and racism and sexism and you name it that exists today. So then it means that those jobs ain't so clean after all. So that's why it really is our job to make sure that our solutions are wrapped around the kind of supportive structures that are needed to address these barriers. A lot of the barriers that we spoke about earlier today. And I'll end with that lesson.
That's great. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Veronica, how about you?
Yeah, so a lot of folks have already said today, named some of the lessons that I've learned, so I don't want to be redundant, but one thing I do just want to highlight is, you know, Gloria said that there are people that are making decisions about our lives. And I just think we need to be super clear. We can't talk about how society is failing our communities or the economy is failing our communities. We need to name the people and the corporations that are responsible for failing our communities. And we need to we need to call them out. We need to name them, we need to call them out, and we need to make demands of them. And so I think what we see is that large corporations hold far too much power over both the workers that produce their wealth and legislative arena, right? With the power that they wield through millions of dollars spent on lobbying. So when we're building our movements, we need to be crystal clear about that, and we need to highlight it. We need to put it front and center. So an example of the way that we've done this in Minnesota is we were very clear that Target is an industry leader in the state of Minnesota, the industry leader in the state of Minnesota, the most powerful corporation in the state of Minnesota. And so as we're calling on Target to play a leadership role, like we need to recognize how powerful they are, and that if they're going to play a leadership role, and that's who we need to focus on, and that others are going to fall in line behind them. So that's the strategy that we need to use. And also be clear that we cannot do this alone. CETUL is a tiny organization. Like, we've done tremendous things, but we're a tiny organization who could not have won this victory alone. And the way that we were able to win this victory is to recognize that if we have big demands to make on this powerful corporation, there are probably other organizations and communities that also have demands to make of these powerful corporations, right? And so what we were able to do was think about our campaign as expanding a bargaining table, not just a bargaining table of these, 1,000 workers that clean retail stores, but think more broadly. So we were able to partner with organizations like Take Action Minnesota, who's in the room today, who was calling on Target to play a leadership role and ban the box, both within their corporation, their corporate structure, but also legislatively to either support our legislation or to at least not be in the way of this legislation. We're also able to partner with communities in an inner-rig suburb called Brooklyn Park, where Target was building its new headquarters and getting all kinds of tax breaks from the city, and had promised investment in the city that wasn't coming through. And so communities of color in Brooklyn Park were standing up to say, we want these investments in our community. And so together we create this movement, this much broader movement than if it was just the janitors. And we don't think just about our own interests, but we think broadly about how we build enough power to make the kinds of demands of huge corporations. So that's a really big lesson that I've learned. And I think that is ultimately what got us to victory. And at the end of the day, Brooklyn Park, folks in Brooklyn Park were able to get investment from Target. Retail janitors were able to win organizing rights. And folks from Take Action Minnesota were able to win Bat Box. So important lesson.
So Rasheen, when you think about investments that can be made, to create jobs, or to have a healthier planet, to care for our children and our elders, what would those investments mean to people in your community?
Those investments are very, very needed in my community and many other communities. Like I had stated earlier, the ability to be able to go to work and go back home and not have the stress, to not have that worry, to not have to ask someone else to help you so you can feel independent is what we want, what individuals in my community want. We want to know that we're going to work, we're doing our duty, we're putting in our time just like every other person, and we're going to go home and we're going to be able to spend time with our family. We're going to be able to spend time with our kids. We're not going to have to be able to go home and have these conversations of how the boss treated me at work, or how I got my hours cut, or how next week I only have 10 hours and this week I had 25. Where am I going to pick up the other ones? These investments of having a fair job, of having a union, having childcare, having health care, having the ability to feel like you did your part is truly, it is beyond needed. It is urgent. Like I say, seeing these other individuals that I work with and that I organize with on a day-to-day basis, it tears me apart sometimes to even have to hear the stories, and I know we hear each other struggle, and I think that's what makes us so much powerful, that we understand that we're not going through this alone. But it also is so hard to hear individuals who are just trying and feel like there's no end goal, and feel like they're never going to get to the point where they can be free in their jobs. And I'd like to say that really tears my heart up. It is needed. It is needed, and it is not just needed in certain communities. It is needed, and we need to be very strategic of what communities that we look at, because it is, unfortunately, is not needed in the 63106 or 63105 zip code in St. Louis, Clayton, Missouri. But when you go to my zip code and you see the life expectancy for an individual like myself is 67, in another zip code it is 91, and the poverty rate in that zip code is like 12%. And you look at my zip code and it's like double that, triple that. Unemployment. We have to get back to the families. We have to get back to making sure that these families are at the front line, that we think about these families, and we think that we put these investments in certain communities.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Rasheen. So much of what you were saying was reminding me a lot of an older woman I got a chance to talk to who's a current worker at Walmart, that she had a full career as a telephone operator and was a unionized worker. She had full union benefits, et cetera. And during the economic crash, she lost a lot of her retirement security, and her family lost jobs. And so she had to go back to work, come out of retirement, go back to work. And I remember asking her, and the only job she could get was this job at Walmart. And I asked her a little bit about what she had experienced over her life and what she was seeing. And one of the things that remains with me deep in my heart is this story she said of, like, I remember a time when people used to literally work to live full lives, like work to be active in our communities, to be active in our PTAs, to be active in our libraries, to build our communities. And today, it just feels like all we do is live to work, right? That's what we're fundamentally talking about here. So in the couple minutes that we have remaining, I'm going to go to our one last question, just to bring a little more heart into this space. If each of you can just share quickly, what's your biggest source of hope in fighting for a better economy for all of us? And I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
So I'm sure, like many of you in this room, we wear many hats. And in addition to being at the helm of Scope, I'm also on the coordinating committee of the Black Worker Center. And Lola Smallwood Cuevas, Lola, if you can raise your hand, is the founder of the Black Worker Center. And if you don't mind, I want to share a story about one of our members at the Black Worker Center, Andre Hollins, who gives me hope. And I want to end with his story, because while we're talking about jobs and job creation, his story is one about access. So again, kind of bringing home this notion of leading with race and equity. So Andre is a father of 2 twin boys, and he was waking up at 4 a.m. every single day going to construction sites across the city. And every day he was getting denied. In Andre's dream, he just wanted to be a carpenter. So here he is, this black man, 4 a.m. every morning, walking up to a construction site, asking questions, and dare I say, asking for work. And unfortunately, it saddens me to say that on more than one occasion, the police was called on him. They did not accept his resume, and he was turned away repeatedly. And it's important for me to say that Andre graduated from a community college. He had all kinds of certifications and all kinds of training with a ready-to-work attitude. But once you've been getting denied day after day after day, and you're a father of 2 twin boys, you end up feeling like giving up. And he was about to give up on his dream to become a carpenter. And it was at that moment that he was referred by a friend to the Black Worker Center. And it was at the Black Worker Center where he was introduced to other Black men and women from the construction trades. And it was there that he began to use his voice and his experience to inform and educate decision makers and make sure that they understood that equity and a representative workforce was an imperative. So it was Andre's voice that demanded strong federal affirmative action language to be included in the project labor agreement. And it was Andre's voice and his experience that demanded strong disadvantaged community criteria in this policy as well. So now we're proud to say that Andre is actually employed, and he's working at USC building dorms.
Lovely. That's terrific. Thank you, Gloria. And Rasheen and Veronica, if you guys can be a couple sentences, what's your biggest source of hope? That's okay. All good.
Took all my time.
All
No, I'm just
good.
kidding. I'm gonna change it a little bit. I'm sorry, can't follow status quo, young person. I know that we're gonna win, and I know that we're gonna get to the end goal is because of all these, once again, unorganized people that are finally stepping up. Individuals that have never stepped up for themselves and saying, I deserve more money, I deserve a union, my life matters, and we will no longer accept the status quo. We will no longer allow things to just happen without us questioning it. So I know we're going to get there with the help of community, labor, faith. We're going to make it happen.
All right. Nice. Veronica.
Very quickly, it's like I think these fights are about a lot more than just being able. They're about more than being able to just survive, right? They're being able to live full lives, and they're about dignity. And a quick story example: one of the leaders in the janitors fight was Maricela Flores, who has 5 kids. She's a single mom. She's working 2 jobs. You know, all of the difficulties that come, all the economic difficulties that come with that. But the thing that I note about her story is that when she started being a leader in this fight, her kids, her family, her sister, her mom said, "Why are you wasting your time? Why are you doing this? You've got 5 kids to take care of, 2 jobs. Like, why are you going to these meetings? You're never going to change anything. Why are you going on these strikes and these fights?" And through the fight, she said, "I'm not going to listen to them. I know why I'm fighting." And she fought without support from her family. And at the end of the fight, after we were able to announce the huge victory that we won with Target, her kids thanked her. Her kids said, "Thank you for doing this. I know you did this for us." And her family said, "We were wrong." And that, again, that kind of transformation, that broadens this, that deepens this, and that gives me hope that this movement's going to grow.
Awesome. That's